Welcome back to the Constitution Line by Line. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier, and we are still deep in Article 2.
Presidency. The executive branch.
Section 2.
Clause 2B.
2B.
Okay. You're not going to say it?
I'm not saying it.
Okay. Control. We're talking about the appointing power of the president, and he shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate.
Oh, the advice and consent clause. I was waiting for it.
Yeah, that's the second time it was used. It was just used with the treaty.
Yeah.
And now it's used here. So, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States, whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. But the Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments.
Whew. Inferior officers.
So,
but this is where the advice and consent really kicks in.
Yes.
And that's why you have Senate hearings over various appointments.
Yeah, and the last count I saw is that the president has to appoint about 2,000 people.
Yeah, that's a lot.
When they become president.
I was amazed when Trump was elected. He put out a general call to the population at large. Do you want to work for us?
Yeah, send in your resume.
Send in your resume. Yeah, I was amazed by that.
And
I know people that did.
And
not one of them got a call.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised either.
Yeah. So there's these 2,000 appointments that the president has initially. About 700 or so are actually key positions.
Sure.
So the top people in agency or bureaucracy. And so those are the people that the president has to appoint. And then the problem is, and we see it especially in the Trump administration, so many of them quit that you have to appoint somebody new.
Yeah.
And so to give you an idea, the latest count I've seen is that of those 700 or so people that the president has to appoint, President Trump still has not appointed anyone for more than 100 of those positions.
Wow.
Here we are in the third year of his presidency, and he just hasn't appointed one. So therefore, you either have an acting person who has limited powers, limited tenure, limited authority.
They're limited everything.
Or you keep in the person who was appointed by the previous president.
Interesting point to make there.
So is that person carrying out your will? And I would
argue. Or is
argue,
it the deep state?
No, see.
I'm baiting you now.
You are. I would argue, from a political science, bureaucratic perspective, President Trump will be found poorly, will be rated poorly in terms of his governance, which is control of the bureaucracy.
Sure.
A lot of attention is focused on executive orders he gives, but not much on the day-to-day governing of the bureaucrats. And that's where the nuts and bolts of government is.
Oh, absolutely.
And he just hasn't put the people in place. His turnover rate is much higher than previous presidents. The vacancies are much greater than previous presidents. But he has chosen to use his powers here selectively by focusing much more on the judiciary, where he has been more successful than any other previous president in getting judges on these inferior courts, Court of Appeals, district courts. And already in 2 years as president, he's appointed 2 justices to the Supreme Court. So he
that's about to become a big deal.
And it sure is, as you think about abortion cases that are heading towards the court. So what we've got is a president who is focusing on one area, judicial activism. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
But ignoring or not paying enough attention to basic government bureaucratic functions.
It's interesting, in Reconstruction, back to that, one of the things that they tried to get Andrew Johnson on, tried to get him impeached, was the Senate claimed that they had an advice and consent function for the removal of executive branch officers.
Whoa, where'd that come from?
Well, he inherited a bunch of people from Lincoln's cabinet, and some of them he didn't quite gee and haw with.
Yeah.
And so he sacked some of the Senate's favorite insiders.
By the way, that's within his powers to do that.
Absolutely. And the Senate said, you can't do that without our advice and consent. And he said, well, watch me. And they said, all right, this president's got to go.
And so they said, watch me.
That's right.
As
And watch
they
us
impeach
as we
him.
impeach you, but can't convict you.
Yeah. Okay. This is a key power. By the way, one of my favorite books is Advise and Consent by Alan Drury, written about the Senate and its ratification, not ratification, but consent power that it has. And it was made into a movie as well.
Huh.
So if you're ever bored sometime, it came out in the 1950s, but it's considered to be one of the classic books, fiction, about Congress and about power.
And how it works.
Yeah. That book really was given to me, and it really got me along this path that led to a PhD in political science.
Really? So that was one of the crossroads books for you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We should put these books up here.
Yeah, this book influenced me. That's interesting. But once again, we've got Congress with a way to hook the president.
Yeah. Congress really set up all these booby traps for the president.
And the Senate, as originally conceived,
Yeah.
had a very important role,
And
which advanced state sovereignty.
Right. And the question is, do they use the power they have? And that's sort of a mixed bag.
It is. Mixed bag.
Okay. Anything else to say about this?
That's it. That's our line.
Yep.
All right. New line next time.